Even Aragorn, a man who had faced monsters and armies, felt fear crawl down his spine. This was no orc. This was ancient, older than the kingdoms of men. The Fellowship fled across the crumbling bridge of Khazad-dûm. Aragorn turned back only to see Gandalf stand against the beast alone. "You shall not pass." The Balrog fell, dragging Gandalf with it. Silence, horror, grief. Aragorn did not have time to mourn. As the Fellowship stumbled out of the east gate into the sunlight, broken and breathless, they looked to him, not as a guide anymore, but as a leader. And he stepped forward, voice firm despite the pain. "We must move. Gandalf's sacrifice will be for nothing if we linger." In that moment, Aragorn changed. He was no longer just the watchful ranger, he was now the Fellowship's compass. And its spine. After the terror of Moria, the Fellowship emerged into sunlight, but not into peace. Gandalf was gone. The wizard who had guided them from the Shire, who stood against shadow and flame, had fallen. The silence among them was heavy. Frodo walked in a daze. Sam clenched his jaw to keep from breaking. Even Legolas lowered his gaze. But Aragorn could not grieve. Not yet. He led them southward, through the trees of Lothlorien, the Golden Wood, where time itself seemed to slow. It was said that no evil could enter those borders, that the trees themselves whispered secrets older than stone. Here, at last, the Fellowship found rest. But for Aragorn, it was more than rest, it was memory. For in this ancient forest lived Galadriel, Lady of Light, and grandmother to Arwen. Aragorn stood before her not as a ranger, but as a man who carried both love and legacy in his heart. Galadriel looked into him, not with judgment, but with understanding. She saw the boy raised in secret, the man burdened by fate, the heart still tethered to her granddaughter. "She has chosen," Galadriel said gently. "The path of the Even Star is now bound to yours." Aragorn said nothing. He didn't need to. He had carried that knowledge like a hidden flame for years. Now it flickered brighter, both a comfort and a curse. While others in the Fellowship received gifts from the lady, Aragorn's gift was not given with fanfare. It was a simple sheath for his reforged sword, Andoril, and a look that pierced time. "You are Isildur's heir," she said, "not because of your blood, but because you endure." In the quiet woods of Lothlorien, Aragorn remembered who he was fighting for. Not just Middle-earth, not just Gondor, but for the chance that love could survive in a world drowning in war. He walked among the golden trees, thinking of Arwen's choice, the price she had already paid, the life she had given up for a future still uncertain. He vowed to be worthy of that sacrifice. The Fellowship would soon leave Lothlorien and head deeper into danger. But for one moment, Aragorn stood still, beneath golden leaves and eternal starlight, where time did not matter and hope still breathed. The Fellowship left Lothlorien with new gifts, rested limbs, and heavy hearts. Each boat glided silently down the river Anduin, the golden wood fading behind them. Ahead lay uncertainty, Mordor to the east, Gondor to the west, and danger in every direction. And within their company, the first cracks began to form. Boromir grew restless. The son of the Steward of Gondor, noble and brave, began to speak of the ring, not as a burden, but as a weapon, a gift, a tool that could save his people. Aragorn saw the change. He saw the hunger building in Boromir's eyes, the way he looked at Frodo when he thought no one noticed. And still, Aragorn said nothing. Perhaps part of him hoped it was just fear. Perhaps part of him feared saying it aloud would make it real. But deep down he knew. The ring was beginning to work its poison. At on hand, the Hill of Seeing, the Fellowship's fragile unity finally shattered. Boromir confronted Frodo, demanding the ring, not in anger but in desperation. He saw Minas Tirith burning in his dreams. He saw his people dying, and he thought, this is the only way. Frodo fled. The moment Boromir realized what he'd done, it was already too late. The Fellowship was broken. Frodo disappeared, determined to continue the journey alone. Sam, loyal beyond measure, followed. And in the chaos, orcs attacked, swarming from the woods with blades and howls. Boromir fought like a lion to defend Merry and Pippin, slaying dozens before falling to arrow after arrow. Aragorn arrived too late to save him. But in those final moments, Boromir saw the man he had doubted. "I would have followed you, my brother. My captain. My king," he whispered, blood on his lips. Aragorn wept, but there was no time to mourn. Merry and Pippin had been taken. Frodo was gone. The Fellowship was scattered. Standing in the forest, wind cold against his face, Aragorn had to make a choice. Chase Frodo into Mordor, or save the others. He chose both. He turned to Legolas and Gimli, eyes sharp with purpose. "Let us hunt some orc." He wasn't a king yet, but he had made a king's decision. The forest behind him still echoed with death. But Aragorn had no time to grieve. Merry and Pippin had been taken, carried off by Uruk-hai, foul creatures bred for war, faster than orcs, stronger than men. Time was running out. Every hour meant more distance between the Fellowship and the two hobbits. So Aragorn ran. With Legolas at his side, light-footed and keen-eyed, and Gimli, stout and tireless, they pursued the orcs day and night. No rest, no hesitation. Only tracks in the grass and smoke on the wind. For days, they pushed through the plains of Rohan, a sea of green stretching endlessly in all directions. The sun beat down, the wind burned. But Aragorn did not slow. He tracked with terrifying precision, pausing to feel footprints, smell broken twigs, notice where the orcs had dragged their prisoners. He read the land like a story. And the story was one of brutality. Yet even in that urgency, Aragorn showed something more than survival instinct. He showed command. When Eomer, captain of the Rohirrim, intercepted them, swords were nearly drawn. The riders of Rohan had killed the orc band the night before, but had seen no hobbits among the dead. To them, Aragorn's story sounded like madness. Halflings, a wizard fallen, a ranger chasing shadows. But Aragorn stepped forward, unbowed. "I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn. If by life or death I can save them, I will." There was steel in his voice. Not arrogance, but authority. The kind that can't be taught, only forged through fire and failure. Eomer, sensing the truth in him, gave them horses. And so the chase continued. They rode harder than ever, pushing their mounts to the brink. And when they reached the battlefield where the orcs had fallen, Aragorn searched the remains with desperate hands. No hobbit bodies, no sign of Frodo. But the clues were there. Small footprints, broken ropes, signs of escape. "They're alive," Aragorn breathed. It was a whisper, but it hit like thunder. For the first time since the Fellowship broke, hope sparked again in his chest. The path ahead was still dangerous, but he would follow it, until the very end. The trail led Aragorn and his companions into the heart of Rohan, a land of open plains, wind-swept hills, and horse-loads proud and fierce. It also led them into a kingdom under siege, not from without, but from within. When they arrived at Edoras, the capital of Rohan, they found its king, Theoden, a shadow of what he once was. His throne was draped in silence, his eyes dulled by darkness. A pale figure named Grima Wormtongue whispered at his side like a serpent in silk. But Aragorn saw through it all immediately. This was no simple court intrigue. This was Saruman's poison, working through deception and despair. Theoden's kingdom was rotting from within, while orcs marched at its borders. Before the king could even lift his eyes, Aragorn's sword was nearly taken at the door. "You would not part a ranger from his blade," he warned, holding Anduril, the flame-forged heirloom of kings, tight in his hand. He did not raise his voice. Didn't need to. He walked into the Golden Hall not as a beggar, not as a wanderer, but as a man whose time had come to stand tall. It was Gandalf, returned from death as Gandalf the White, who broke Wormtongue's hold and awakened Theoden from his stupor. But it was Aragorn who stood beside him, silent and strong, as the old king reclaimed his voice. He didn't issue commands. He didn't shout. He simply stood there, tall, steady, kingly in everything but name. When Theoden decided to ride out against the encroaching forces of Saruman, Aragorn chose to ride with him. Not for duty, not for glory, but because the people of Rohan were in danger, and Aragorn had made a vow long ago, not to abandon the world to shadow. Still, doubts lingered among the Rohirrim. Who was this ranger from the north? Could he be trusted? Was he a threat to the kingdom? And yet, As he moved through their ranks, as he spoke with warriors and farmers alike, something shifted. They began to believe, not because of his sword, but because of his presence. The King of Gondor had not yet taken his throne, but the people were already beginning to feel him rise. The storm was coming. Saruman had unleashed his army, 10,000 Uruk-hai, bred for war, bound for Helm's Deep, the ancient stronghold of Rohan. It was a fortress carved into stone, a last refuge for the people. But it was no match for a force that large, not without hope, not without unity. As the skies darkened, Aragorn stood beside King Theoden, preparing for battle. The walls were lined with farmers, boys too young to shave, old men too tired to run. Most had never held a sword, but Aragorn had. He moved through them, not as a commander shouting orders, but as a brother in arms. He adjusted helmets, sharpened blades, spoke softly to those trembling behind their shields. He didn't lie to them. There is no dawn for us unless we fight. Even Theoden, hardened by grief and bitterness, struggled to believe they had any chance. But Aragorn never flinched, not because he lacked fear, but because he had learned how to carry it. When the horns of war sounded and the Uruks marched through the rain, Aragorn was first to the front line, sword raised. He fought like a man possessed, not for glory, not for kingship, but for every soul huddled in the caves behind the walls. Side by side with Legolas and Gimli, he held the line as long as mortal hands could. He bled, he stumbled, he rose again. Arrow after arrow fell. The gates buckled, the walls shattered. And still, he fought. But even he knew, it wouldn't be enough. Then, as night gave way to the thinnest edge of dawn, a horn sounded in the distance. Gandalf had returned. With him rode Eomer and the riders of Rohan, sweeping down the hill like a wave of light against darkness. The tide turned, the enemy broke. And the day, against all odds, was won. In the aftermath, the people of Rohan did not chant Theoden's name. They looked to Aragorn. He had no crown, no throne, but he had earned their hearts. The boy from Rivendell was gone. What remained was a leader no longer hiding from destiny, but riding straight into it. Helm's Deep had been saved, but Aragorn knew the war was far from over. Victory had come with a cost, and with a question. What would Saruman do next? But when Aragorn, Gandalf, Legolas, Gimli, and King Theoden rode to Isengard, they found something they didn't expect. They found it in ruins. The once mighty tower of Orthanc stood intact, but the grounds around it had been reduced to rubble and twisted steel. The rivers had flooded it, its forges were drowned. The Uruk-hai armies, gone. And standing in the middle of it all, like children who'd broken a toy too big to understand, were Merry and Pippin. The Ents, ancient tree-like shepherds of the forest, had marched to war. Led by Treebeard, they had torn Saruman's war machine apart from its roots. No spell of flame could stop them. But for Aragorn, the victory was not just strategic, it was personal. He had mourned Merry and Pippin. He had chased their captors across hundreds of miles. Now, seeing them alive, safe, and laughing over barrels of stolen pipeweed, something in him finally let go. The fellowship had not completely broken. Not yet. And then came the reckoning. Gandalf confronted Saruman, who remained locked inside Orthanc. Bitter, proud, still poisoned by his belief in power. He had once been the leader of their order. Now he was a pawn of Sauron. Or worse, his rival. Aragorn listened in silence as Saruman spat venom from his high perch. The wizard tried to bend Theoden's will, tried to shake Aragorn's confidence. But there was no fear left in the ranger's eyes, only resolve. Saruman's staff shattered. His power was broken. But still, Aragorn felt it. This was not the end. This was only a distraction. Sauron was moving in Mordor. The Eye was awake. And the ring was still out there, somewhere beyond the veil of fire and ash. Aragorn stood at the edge of the ruin, staring eastward. Victory over Saruman had given them breathing room. But breathing room wasn't survival. "The war is not over," he said. And in his voice, for the first time, there was something that even kings feared: urgency. The tide of war was rising fast. Sauron had unleashed his armies. Gondor stood on the brink of siege. And though the victory at Helm's Deep had given hope, Aragorn knew hope alone would not win this war. They needed something more. That's when Elrond's sons came to him, bearing a message from their father and a sword. Andril, reforged from the shards of Narsil, had already tasted battle. But now, Elrond had delivered another inheritance. Take the Dimholt Road, the message read. The dead do not suffer the living to pass, but you are Isildur's heir. It was a path few dared even whisper about. A haunted realm beneath the White Mountains, where an ancient curse lingered. An oath broken, a king dishonored, a people damned to shadow. But Aragorn understood what was being asked of him. He had to summon the dead men of Dunharrow, ghosts of traitors who had once sworn loyalty to Isildur, then fled the field when the Dark Lord rose. In shame, they had been cursed to linger beyond death, until their oath was fulfilled, and only Isildur's heir could call them. Aragorn did not flinch. He turned from Theoden's muster and led Legolas and Gimli to the mouth of the mountain. Cold wind, black stone, no moon. Even Gimli, fearless among orcs and trolls, trembled. But Aragorn stepped forward into the darkness. Inside, the air was thick with silence. Whispers echoed with no speaker. Shadows flickered where no flame burned. And then they came. Ghosts, pale, hollow-eyed, armed with weapons long rusted in the real world. They circled him, voices like wind on bone. Who enters the domain of the dead? Aragorn raised Andúril. Its flame gleamed not with fire, but with truth. I am Isildur's heir. I summon you to fulfill your oath. The ghost hesitated. Centuries of shame held him back. But Aragorn did not waver. He looked them in the eye, not as a supplicant, but as a king. And they followed. From that moment, the fate of the war changed course. Aragorn had stepped into death and walked out with an army. The White City was burning. Minas Tirith, proud jewel of Gondor, stood under siege. The skies above it blackened with smoke and winged beasts. Catapults roared, orcs flooded the Pelennor fields. And in the heart of the storm, Gondor stood alone. But help was coming. And with it, a ghostly vengeance. While Theoden and the Riders of Rohan charged into battle, breaking the orc ranks with thunder and blade, Aragorn took a darker road. Sailing up the river Anduin, he came not with banners, but with silence. The ships of the corsairs of Umbar, allies of Sauron, blackened the horizon. Gondor's hope began to flicker, until the sails dropped, and Aragorn emerged, not alone. Behind him came the army of the dead, a tide of pale warriors, cursed spirits who had waited centuries for release. At his command, they poured from the ships, sweeping over the battlefield like a storm of vengeance. No blade could stop them, no wall could hold them. They tore through the orcs like wind through dry leaves. The tide turned. What had seemed like Gondor's final hour became its salvation. Aragorn fought not from behind the lines, but in the thick of it, his sword, Andúril blazing, cutting down foes with terrifying speed. To those who saw him, he looked like a figure from legend. Tall, grim, eyes burning with purpose. He called men to rally. He lifted fallen warriors to their feet. He didn't order them forward, he led them. When the battle was done, and the field lay covered in blood and ruin, Aragorn turned to the ghosts. Their oath was fulfilled, and with a single word, he released them. Be at peace. The spirits faded like mist in sunlight, and with them, the shadow of ancient shame. Gondor had been saved, but the war was far from over. In the aftermath, men turned to Aragorn, not just as a warrior, but as something more, a symbol. The blood of kings flowed in his veins, but it was his choices, not his crown, that made them follow him. For the first time, in the eyes of Gondor, the king had returned. Gondor stood but barely. The Battle of Pelennor Fields had ended, yet Aragorn knew it was only a reprieve. The eye of Sauron was still fixed on Mordor's gates, searching, calculating, waiting. The ring was still out there, hidden, but not safe. And time was running out. Aragorn gathered the leaders of the Free Peoples, Gandalf, Éomer, Imrahil, and others. He offered a plan so bold it bordered on madness. They would march on the Black Gate, not to win, but to distract. The goal was simple: draw Sauron's eye away from Frodo. Give the ring-bearer the smallest chance to reach Mount Doom. It was a suicide mission, wrapped in strategy. And Aragorn never blinked. "Let us draw his gaze, even if we cannot hold it," he said. "We must give hope a chance." He marched with an army of 6,000. Against Mordor's legions, it was a whisper in the wind. As they approached the Black Gate, the Morannon, the land itself seemed to recoil. The sky turned red. The wind stank of sulfur and ash. Shadows moved with hunger. Still, Aragorn rode at the front. At the gates, they were met by the mouth of Sauron, a twisted herald with eyes like cold flame. He jeered, taunted, showed them Frodo's mithril coat and elven blade, claiming the ring-bearer was captured. Aragorn said nothing. Then, he drew his sword, and in one swift stroke, he cut off the mouth's head. "I do not believe you," he said. With that, the armies of Mordor poured forth, tens of thousands, orcs, trolls, beasts of war, a black tide against the stone of hope. But Aragorn stood firm. Atop a hill of shattered stone, with death surrounding him, he turned to his men. "Hold your ground, hold your ground." His voice rang like a bell of war and destiny. "A day may come when the courage of men fails, but it is not this day." And with a cry he led the charge, into death, into legend, not as a king seeking glory, but as a man giving everything so that two hobbits could finish what no one else could. The Black Gate exploded into chaos. Orcs and trolls clashed with the lost army of the West. Screams echoed across the broken plains of Mordor, steel met steel, and dust soaked the skies. At the heart of it all, Aragorn fought like a man who had already accepted death. Because he had. He knew this battle wasn't about victory, it was about time. Time for Frodo. Aragorn cut through enemies with Anduril, his blade singing with every strike. Beside him, Gimli, Legolas, and Eomer stood fast, surrounded on all sides. The hill where they fought became a beacon, a defiance the enemy could not ignore. And then, everything stopped. A tremor shook the earth, the sky cracked. From the distance, far across the ashen plains, came a roar like the end of the world. Mount Doom erupted. Flames soared into the sky. A tower crumbled in the distance. Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, the very seat of Sauron's power. The eye, once fixed on the battlefield, wavered, then screamed. A sound with no voice, no body, only will. And then, silence. The ring had been destroyed. By Frodo. And by Gollum, in a twist even fate couldn't predict. In that moment, the armies of Mordor crumbled. Trolls staggered, orcs fled in panic. Some simply fell to their knees, undone by the power that had held them together. The darkness spilled away like smoke and wind. Aragorn stood breathless, covered in ash and blood, but alive. He looked to the east, toward the ruined mountain, and whispered not a cheer, but a prayer. They had done it. Middle-earth was free. But victory didn't feel like glory. It felt like quiet and grief. Boromir, Theoden, countless others had fallen for this moment. And Frodo, Sam, where were they now? Gandalf soon brought the answer. From the fires of Mordor, the hobbits were alive. Broken, burned, but alive. And Aragorn, the ranger who had once walked alone through shadow, knelt beside them. Not as a king, not as a warrior, but as a friend. "You bow to no one," he told them. And he meant it. The war was over. But Aragorn's greatest test was still to come. The war was over. Sauron had fallen. The ring was gone. Peace, for the first time in an age, had returned to Middle-earth. And now, the crownless would be crowned. The white city of Minas Tirith, battered but still standing, opened its gates to receive its king. The people lined the streets, silent at first. Then, as the procession approached, they began to cheer. But it was not just a celebration, it was a reckoning. For too long, the line of kings had been broken. Gondor had endured under stewards, faithful, but not destined. The blood of Isildur, once a curse, was now their salvation. Aragorn walked through the city not draped in gold, not surrounded by banners, but with quiet reverence. Behind him came Gandalf, Faramir, Eomer, and others who had seen what he truly was. Not just a warrior, but a leader shaped by fire and humility. At the steps of the citadel, Gandalf held the ancient crown of Gondor, silver and jeweled, glinting in the morning sun. But Aragorn paused. He turned to the man who had resisted him, fought beside him, and nearly died for him. Faramir, son of Denethor, the last steward. Shall he be king and enter into the city? Gandalf asked. Faramir knelt. The hands of the king are the hands of the healer. Thus shall the rightful king be known. Aragorn took the crown and bowed his head, not in pride, but in service. Gandalf placed it upon him. Elessar Tel Gondor, the elf stone. The king had returned. Cheers erupted from the walls, rising like a wave that swept the city. But Aragorn didn't raise his arms. He didn't shout. Instead, he sang. In Elvish, the tongue of the firstborn, he sang of peace, of sorrow, and of a new age, rising from the ruins of the old. This was not a conqueror's victory. It was a promise. Later, he would walk among the people, heal the wounded with his hands, and speak to every soul not as ruler, but as guardian. The throne of Gondor had been empty for generations. But now, it held a king not forged in luxury, but in sacrifice. He had won the crown. He had reclaimed the throne. But there was still one piece of Aragorn's destiny left unfinished. Arwen. For years, she had been the silent star in his sky. The love he carried through every trial, every mile, every moment of doubt. She had made her choice long ago beneath the golden trees of Lothlorien, giving up immortality for a life that would burn bright, and end in time. Now, with Sauron defeated and peace restored, the road that had separated them finally ended. She came to Minas Tirith with the elves of Rivendell, riding in quiet grace. The people watched in awe, for Arwen Undomil was no ordinary bride. She was the daughter of Elrond, granddaughter of Galadriel, the even star of her people. A being of near mythical beauty, now stepping into the world of men. For one man alone. When Aragorn saw her, the weight of years fell from him. He did not rush to her. He did not weep. He simply held her eyes, because no words were left to say. They were wed in the city of kings, beneath the white tree, with the stars above and the world reborn around them. The ceremony was quiet. Elves sang songs older than stone. Gondorians wept. Even the hobbits smiled in silence, understanding that they were witnessing something greater than politics or power. This was love earned. Aragorn held Arwen's hands, and with her, he wasn't the King of Gondor. He was simply the boy from Rivendell, the ranger who walked in shadow, the man who endured, not for a crown, but for the chance to stand beside her. Their wedding did more than bind two hearts. It united the realms of men and elves, bridging the two worlds for the last time before the elves sailed west. Elrond, Arwen's father, watched with quiet sorrow. But even he, at last, saw what his daughter had chosen. Not just mortality, but meaning. From that day on, Arwen became queen of the reunited kingdom. And Aragorn, once called Estel, Hope, now lived not just as a king, but as the man who had made hope real. Aragorn ruled wisely and long. Under his reign, Gondor and Arnor were reunited. Peace spread across the lands that had once been torn by shadow. The white tree bloomed again. Roads were rebuilt. Old alliances restored. The age of men truly began. And it was Aragorn Elessar, the elf stone, who guided it into light. But even kings cannot escape time. Unlike Arwen, Aragorn had always known his life would be brief by elven standards. The blood of Númenor gave him long years, more than most men. But mortality still waited at the edge of every sunrise. He did not fear it, he had faced worse. In the 120th year of the Fourth Age, Aragorn felt the weight of years grow heavy. His hair silvered, his steps slowed, but his mind remained sharp, his heart steady. He looked upon his son, Eldarion, heir to the throne, and knew it was time. Unlike those who clung to power, Aragorn chose the path of the ancient kings of Númenor. He would relinquish life willingly, before weakness and weariness could claim him. It was not an act of surrender, but of grace. A final gift to the world he had protected. He summoned Arwen to his side. She had given up immortality for him, and now, she would watch him leave. The sorrow in her eyes could not be measured. But there was no bitterness, only love, and a pain too deep for words. This is the gift of men, Aragorn told her gently. To leave when the work is done. He lay in the House of Kings, robed in white, his sword across his chest. He looked at Arwen and whispered his final words. In sorrow, We must go. But not in despair. Then with peace in his heart, he willed himself to die. Not with fear, but with dignity. Middle-earth did not tremble. No armies clashed, no horns blew. It was a quiet passing, for the greatest king of the age. Aragorn left behind a kingdom renewed, a son ready, and a legacy that would outlive stone and song. He was born in exile. He died in peace. And he lived as legend. He was gone. Aragorn, king, lover, the man Arwen had chosen over eternity, had passed beyond the circles of the world, and with him, her light dimmed. In the silence that followed his death, Arwen Undomiel, queen of the reunited kingdom, said nothing. She simply faded. She had given up her immortality for one lifetime with him. That lifetime had now run its course. There would be no ship to Valinor, no healing in the west, no second dawn. The daughter of Elrond, born in starlight, now stood alone among the mortal world she had embraced. She gave her son Eldarion her blessing, quietly, with a mother's strength. And then, she turned away from Minas Tirith, from the court, the crown, the white tree, and all the echoes of their life, together. She journeyed alone to Lothlorien, the golden wood where their love had once blossomed beneath the Malorn trees. But the forest was empty now. The elves had sailed. The song had ended. The leaves had fallen. Only silence remained. There, among the roots of forgotten beauty, she laid herself upon the mossy hill of Serin Amroth, the very place where Aragorn had first spoken his heart, long ago, where she had chosen mortality, not knowing what pain it would bring. She wore no crown, no jewels, only memory. And there she died. No grand ceremony, no weeping crowds, only the wind through golden leaves, whispering her name. Arwen. She was the last echo of the elves in Middle-earth, and her passing marked the final end of an age. Yet her love endures, not in the pages of history, but in the hearts of those who remember what it means to choose love over fear, sacrifice over comfort, mortality over forever. She and Aragorn became more than legend. They became the bridge between worlds, the end of the firstborn, and the dawn of the race of men. The days of the elves had ended, the ring was gone, the shadow of Sauron, broken. And now, Aragorn was gone too. Arwen's light had faded. The fellowship had parted. The last great tales of the Third Age were now memories, sung in halls and whispered by firelight. But Aragorn's legacy lived on, not in monuments or marble, but in the hearts of those who had followed him. His son, Eldarion, took the throne. He ruled with the same steady wisdom, the same quiet strength. The kingdoms of Gondor and Anor remained united under the reunited kingdom, a symbol of hope made real. Across the lands, the name Elisar became more than a title. It became a reminder that greatness is not born, it's forged. Forged in pain, sacrifice, love, and purpose. In the north, the Dunedain still kept watch over the wild places, guided by the memory of the ranger who became a king. In Rohan they told stories of the man who fought beside their riders, uniting kingdoms through honor. In the Shire, 4 hobbits remembered a tall man with gray eyes and a soft voice, who called them heroes when the world didn't know their names. And in Elven song, what few remained, Aragorn was sung not as a warrior, but as Estel, hope, the one who walked in shadow and chose the light, the one who stood not for himself, but for others. His story was not perfect. He doubted, he fell, he bled. But in every choice he made, he pushed back against the darkness, not with power, but with principle. And perhaps that's what made him worthy of the crown, not that he claimed it, but that he never needed it to lead. Now, his sword Anduril rests in the halls of kings. The white tree still blooms, and the world he helped save moves on, quietly, peacefully. But sometimes when the wind brushes the stones of Minas Tirith just right, it's said you can still hear his voice. I am Aragorn, son of Arathorn, and I have kept no hope for myself. And so, the tale ends, not with a war cry, but with the silence of a world rebuilt, and the echo of a man who became legend. Forever.